continues to be one of the most difficult rescue missions in history. On Sunday, a tourist submarine with 5 people on board went missing during a dive to the wreckage of the Titanic.
And with oxygen levels on board the vessel now thought to be dwindling, we are joined by the former flag officer of Submarines, Rear Admiral Roger Lane-Nott.
Yeah, also going to be speaking to former ABC News Science editor Dr. Michael Guillen, who was the first TV reporter to visit the Titanic wreckage in 2000. So we'll start with you. Michael, thank you so much for making the time for joining us. And I we were just talking during the break. I wish it was under better circumstances and we could be talking about what this trip's like. But for you, back in 2000, you were the first TV correspondent to visit the wreck on a Russian submersible, and you had your own brush with death. And I've seen you interviewed this most extraordinary story. Can you tell us about it?
Yes, very briefly. Good morning, Dermot and Holly. We left from Halifax, Nova Scotia, parked above the point where the Titanic went down in the North Atlantic. The dive went beautifully, 2.5 hours down. We toured the bow to begin with. We had a moment of prayer to commemorate the memory of the people who lost their lives down there. That hit me really hard. And then the problem started when we started going towards the stern. You'll recall the Titanic broke into 2 pieces. The bow went straight down. The stern did a somersault, landed on its back, exposing the propeller. So my attention was on that propeller. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's very shiny, very large compared to kind of the shades of gray that are down there. It's almost like being on the lunar surface. And then I sensed that my sub was accelerating, which struck me as odd. We should be decelerating. We're approaching this huge propeller. And I later found out that we got caught in an underwater current. They do exist down there, believe it or not. And it just slammed us right. And we somehow got wedged behind the blades of the propeller, which is much larger than our little sub, and the inverted poop deck. And we saw these huge chunks of the Titanic coming down on us. And we knew almost immediately, after a moment of confusion, like what just happened, like being in a car wreck. You're driving along 1 minute, it's a beautiful sunny day, everything is going well. And then boom, all of a sudden you're thrust into this, and like, we all fell silent because we didn't want to disturb the pilot. He was at the edge of his seat at that point, really trying to communicate with the mothership in Russian. We didn't know what he was saying, but we could tell from the intonation of the voice that we were in real serious trouble.
So, well, that's what I was going to ask you, because that is the last place you want to have an incident like that, when you're so deep under the water. I mean, was there a point when you were thinking, God, this is it, we're not going to make it out of here?
Yes, Holly, because, you know, up until then, everything was going fine, and you almost forget where you are. You know, you're just so focused on seeing this ship, this famous ship, and you can't believe that you're actually down there touring and sensing the presence of the people whose lives were lost down there. It's very palpable. You can feel their spirit, their presence, whatever word you want to use. And so this came out of nowhere. And when that happens, my scientific brain immediately goes into, okay, let's solve this problem, right? I've reared my son to believe that for every problem there is an optimal solution, not just a solution, but an optimal one. So that's where I went. That was my default position. And very quickly I found out, wow, there are no ways out of here. You're under 2.5 miles of water in the middle of nowhere. You can't just call the tow service. They're not going to just tow you out. And that was hard for me. That was a hard pill for me to swallow. And it hit me like a brick wall. And I felt the sadness. I thought of my wife. I'd never see her. And I really, at that point, knew that this was the end of the road for me.
And how long did you have to process that? Was it a couple of hours before the pilot and the submersible regained power or were able to get themselves out of the situation?
You know, you lose track of time down there, Dermot, but it was somewhere between a half hour and an hour, but it seemed like an eternity because every minute down there that you're stuck and you're literally buried alive in this tin can, there's no other way to put it, not buried alive in ground, but you're buried alive in the water. And so it just stretches out for an eternity. You lose any sense of time. But it was somewhere between a half hour and an hour, I say the better part of an hour, that we finally sensed that something had happened. The sub quieted down. We had a sense of floating. Remember, it's utterly dark down there. There's absolutely no light whatsoever. And so you're just going by feel and by noise. And we sensed floating. And so I turned to my pilot at one point, curious as to what happened. And I said, okay, very trepidatiously, And then he turned and with a big smile and his thick German, Russian accent, I'll never forget, he said, "No problem."
God,
and for a
the
moment, I
relief.
went, what do you mean, no problem? What? Does that mean? I thought maybe the engine was dead and we were literally dead in the water. And I realized, oh my gosh, we've been given a second chance
Yeah.
at life just when I was ready to cross over. And that's a feeling I'll never forget.
I bet the relief must be huge. Just finally, before we let you go, this must be incredibly hard for you at this time because you know yourself what these people, these 5 people, are going through right now.
For the last 72 hours, it's been hell for me, Holly, to be honest with you, because it's almost like I feel I'm down there with them. I know what they went through. I feel it. I'm very empathetic towards it. And I was hoping that they would experience that second chance at life that I did. And I almost feel guilty talking to you this morning about how I was given that second chance. But it's pretty remote that they're going to be given a second chance. And it's just a terrible way to go. My only hope and prayer is that they experience that sense of peace that I did when I was ready to let go of my life. That's the only thing that I cling to, but this has been hell.
Well, listen, we're so sorry.
It's almost like I'm down there with them.
I'm so sorry that this is all bringing it back for you, but thank you so much for sharing a story because you're one of the only people.
I know.
We start every show with we can't imagine what they're going through, but you are one of the only people in the world that can imagine what they're going through, and so it's an incredible insight and it's a very difficult one for you to share. But thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, your voice words really paint the picture.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's speak to Rear Admiral Roger Lane-Nott, who was on earlier on the week with us and explained so articulately, I guess, where the operation is and the chances of the success. So, obviously, so much has changed since we spoke to you last. I mean, genuinely, is there any real hope here, Roger?
Well, there's always hope. Even that, I believe that they're sufficiently experienced that they will have tried to eke out their oxygen as much as they possibly can by, lying quietly and so forth, and even turning it down. What worries me about it is if they've had some sort of power failure, it's not the oxygen that's the problem, it's the CO2. And they have a CO2 scrubber in the submarine, which actually is run by electricity. So if they have no electricity, the scrubber doesn't work. Right. It's the CO2 that's going to get you.
God, yeah.
And that's the thing. I think what will happen is I don't think that the Coast Guard and the various authorities will stop the search. I think it'll go on for at least another 24 hours. I don't think it'll be pulled unless the family agree to it being pulled. That's my view. The interesting thing about the noises, certainly the noises that have been heard from the sonar boys from the Canadian P3s, one of the issues with it's all very well to hear those things and to analyze them, which it has been done by all the experts in the States and Canada. But the reality of it is that unless you triangulate from 3 different buoys to give you a fix, it's not helping you. Where are they? That you haven't got a definitive area to go to. So I think that's a particular problem. And I don't either agree that I think those guys would, unless they've got a specific plan, in which case we've not heard about it, I don't think they'd be trying to send out an SOS knocking on the hull every 30 minutes. I think they'd be doing it more frequently than that, probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Can you, sorry, Roger, can you just explain that? Because most laymen would probably hear, oh, OK, they've heard the noises, therefore would it not be easy, we're used to these movies with submarines in the bottom, would it not be easy to locate it? But why is it so difficult to locate it?
Well, because the way that the P3s, the aircraft actually do that is that they get an area and it will tell them it's within a region of that area, but it won't give them a specific position of where it is. And the only way you can do that is by having 3 buoys and actually triangulating what you're getting from those 3 buoys, and that hopefully will give you a much more specific and closer area.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, sort of going forward, because when we didn't know much about this company, we know a lot about them now, and I think there's been lots of concerns. Something you raised yourself, that the issue here is that there's no regulation within these commercial vehicle, so much so that if ever you were given the opportunity to go on something like this, you would absolutely turn it down.
Yeah. Yeah, I would turn it down. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in submarines and different types of submarines, but this is not my bag at all. The problem really is that there doesn't seem to be any certification process for vehicles like this. Any other ship, merchant ship, warship, whatever, has got to be certified by Lloyd's, unless you can't get insured. And I suspect this vessel is not insured. I don't know, but I suspect it's not insured. We know that it's an experimental vessel. They're on the edge. That's what you do if you're an explorer. You're on the edge. So, but I'm sure what will come on after this, there will be perhaps some more interest in trying to make a proper certification. You know, when I look back to, I built a nuclear submarine, I say personally, I was in Barrow standing by the building of HMS Splendid. And we had numerous checks, balances, check again, to make sure that it was absolutely as it should be. You know, for example, proper non-destructive tests of the hull to make sure every weld was absolutely right. But again, it's too late to worry about that now. I mean, obviously, I actually think we've just got to remain hopeful until there's no more hope. And that's not going to happen, in my view, for a few hours.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for your time
Roger,
again. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, yeah, it's still a search and rescue mission, so
absolutely.
let's just hold on to that.